Hi there. Welcome to A Creative Affair, a collection of conversations exploring creativity through the art of photography and other creative passions. I'm Len Metcalf, a creative with a love of art. Drawing was my first big creative passion. I would spend hours and hours working on artworks of Mother Nature, trees, flowers, and romantic landscape scenes. I loved drawing in lead pencil. Later came a love of ink, and then watercolours followed. I went to art school to learn to be an artist and develop my skills in drawing. Unfortunately, my drawings of Mother Nature didn't fit into a paint on the floor art school. If I'd taken my clothes off and rolled in paint on a canvas, I would have got much higher marks, to be honest. I wilted in negative critiques. I found I blossomed in the photography department with a couple of incredibly encouraging and supportive teachers. My other creative passion is actually writing. One that I didn't believe I could do because of my failures at school. I failed English. I missed out on the selective school. I really struggled with essays. I have no idea how I got through 3 degrees and actually did a master's degree. But in the last 8 years, I have really spent the time and learnt to write. And do you know what the key to that was? Was actually learning to write for me in the way that I think and feel, and letting go of expectations for other people, for having an audience or what I should be writing.
My goodness. Isn't that the case with so many of us?
It is, isn't it? I think that we have this common story of failures and successes and figuring out who we really are in the process and how we should go about being a creative person. And really, isn't that, Brie, that's the whole point of our podcast, isn't it, is talking about this journey of understanding ourselves as creatives.
For sure. Right. And as Len said, I am Brie. I am actually a certified life coach for creatives. I'm a mom to 4 awesome kids. And this year, in 2021-22, one exchange student from Norway. I'm a musician, photographer, and a lifelong creator. And I love hiking and enjoying the beauty of nature. And I'm also a Texas ambassador for Nature First Photography. And if you don't know what that is, you can go to their website, which is naturefirstphotography.org, and check it out. I'll tell you again in a second. And what they are actually the Alliance for Responsible Nature Photography. And as an ambassador, and also a member, I follow these principles. They're the Nature First principles. Okay. And so one is prioritize the well-being of nature over photography. 2, educate, and these are not in any particular order, but educate yourself about the places you photograph or walk. Reflect on the possible impact of your actions. Use discretion if sharing locations. Know and follow rules and regulations. Always follow leave no trace principles and strive to leave places better than you found them. Actively promote and educate others about these principles, which is what I'm doing now. So whether you are a pro photographer, whatever camera you have, including a smartphone, so if you've ever taken a walk and used your phone, then you can follow these Nature First principles. So I encourage you to visit their website. Again, it is www.naturefirstphotography.org, and take the pledge to help us conserve the places we love. So that is my Protect the the nature spiel.
Brie, I'm just going to interrupt you and come in there that this is such a fabulous thing that these people are doing. This is an issue that is incredibly strong to my heart. I've written numerous articles about this over the last 20 years. I think it's such an important thing, and these people have come together, picked up the Leave No Trace principles and that movement that is quite strong, and actually applied it to photography, and created an incredible forum for us to talk about it and make it easier to have those difficult conversations with some of those people that are not doing this. And by having an organisation around an art movement like this to talk about environmentalism and how we treat it is absolutely incredible. And I'm a member as well. I've been a member since it's very early on, and had some very interesting conversations with them, and I support them absolutely fully. And someone that comes from a conservation mindset, I think it's incredibly important to promote environmental values when we take so much creativity and from Mother Nature. So thank you so much for sharing that, Brie, and I just want to give my support for that organisation and the people behind it. It's just such a wonderful thing.
It's so beautiful that they created it, and they're trying to do a lot more. So it's just really important that we protect what's beautiful around us, so that we can enjoy it, others can enjoy it, and our children can enjoy it. So I expect it.
What was their website address again?
www.naturefirstphotography.org. And don't let the photography part, I know this is a podcast for all creatives, but don't let the photography part discourage you, because this is it really is for everyone to understand how we can be responsible.
There is an organisation for everyone, and it's called Leave No Trace, and it started in the USA, I think, and it's worldwide. Yes. We have a chapter here in Australia, and it works with local environmental organisations to develop land management practices and use practices that are adapted for the local environment. And one of the things about Leave No Trace, and it's something that Nature First also does, is that we need to adapt our practices to the location where we actually are shooting in, and it's different. Some places we walk in the river, and others we have to walk on the rocks, and then in another place walking on the rocks is a terrible thing to do. So it changes all around the world, and Leave No Trace is also a fantastic organisation for anyone that's looking to venture into the woods or into any beautiful wilderness areas. Anyway, we should get back onto our topic of our podcast, Brie. What were we talking about today? Can you? I've forgotten.
Today, yes, that's our spiel. Okay, that's our one time for this season. There you go. Today we're going to talk about expectations, and I really love this conversation, because I've had to not break myself of this, but understand my own what the expectations I have for my own self, and also how I want to use them for the work, the art that I create, because I think they can be used in a really constructive way, but also in a destructive way too. So I think to start off, always I like to define what an expectation is. I always just look it up in the dictionary. It's a strong belief that something will happen, anything, whatever it is. We have some thought that something is going to happen, and it could be a variety of things, and that is an expectation. So, Len, why
yes,
do
Brie.
you have you have you had expectations in your work, and why? Well, let's pause for a second. I'll ask you that in a little bit. Why do we have expectations? Let's just answer that first.
I think it's naturally for us humans to have three different areas of thought sometimes, and I'm making this up and generalizing it at the same time. But one is to look back and reflect on things. One is to be present in the moment right now, and the other is to look into the future. And a lot of mental illness is also tied into that. Like anxiety is future driven and depression is past driven, and so I think expectations are thinking often about the future and what can happen into the future. And so I think we all love daydreaming and wondering what we're going to do next. Well, I don't know if all is the correct answer there, because some of us are caught in the past. And some people actually have this beautiful ability to live in the present. And as creatives, planning and coming up with ideas of things to do into the future becomes an incredibly important part of our lives, doesn't it? That it's built into our practice, this idea of making things and making plans. So once we start making plans and those sort of things, we end up having expectations, don't we? And I think expectations gets us in trouble.
Yeah, quite a lot, doesn't it? And, a lot of our expectations can be, right, they're always about the future, but they can be based on the past. Like, for me, if I'm having an expectation, I'm sometimes trying to repeat something that happened in the past. And by the way, Len and I are both photographers, so we relate this a lot to our photography. But certainly this can relate to, to so much art. Like if I'm a flutist, and so I could practice a piece and have it sound one way, and then I could also have an expectation that I play it exactly the same when I'm in front of 200 people. But the circumstances have changed, and so my thoughts, the expectations, but also I have other thoughts that might derail me, and maybe that's some stage fright stuff. But the expectation that I perform well, it could be something that I'm dealing with at that time, right? And of course, I would almost in that moment want that. But when I'm doing photography and I'm walking, I'm going somewhere, and I have an expectation that the conditions will be, that the weather will do exactly what it did a week ago or whatever, that's probably not a very helpful expectation. And that's basing my expectation on the past and trying to repeat it. I also think our expectations try to keep us safe, because it's a little bit uncomfortable not to know what to expect. Like our minds are always trying to predict what will come next. So that feels like a really safe place to be, is knowing what's going to happen, having thoughts about like expectational thoughts about what is going to happen. And that really like makes a nice little bubble, like a cozy bubble for myself, like in the moment. But it's the aftermath that we have to deal with when we don't quite meet those. We'll talk about those. So, any other thoughts?
It sounds like a lot of expectations there are habit and come from the past, don't they? That the way that we've done things in the past and we want them to happen again, or projecting how we would like something to happen into the future. And as you're saying there, that can be a wonderful safety mechanism. But it can also get in our way, can't it? It can derail us, take us astray, and lead us to disappointment so many times, can't it?
Yeah. And also expectations, part of the reason why we do have expectations, and we're not saying that these are all the different reasons we would have expectations or why we have them. But another reason to have them is because we're afraid of failing. Like there's something important, like if we've talked about goals and projects already, but if we're maybe working on something big and we feel the pressure on ourselves to finish it or to perform in a certain way, we might be afraid of failing. And so we have these expectations that we have to do certain things. This has to be done. I have to produce this. I have to create this. I have to play in this way, or, finish this chapter by midnight, right? Whatever it is, these are expectations that we have so that we can protect ourselves from failing, which also failure is just a construct of our minds as well, because failure is just it's something that we create for ourselves.
As photographers, failure is one of those things that we actually understand quite a lot about, and we should talk about this too in depth. But we take thousands of photographs to get one, and so if we have in our mindset that each one that isn't a good one is a failure, what are we doing? Do we spend our lives failing just to get one? And by reframing that and considering each one that we take as an enjoyable process, as a learning experience, as an exploration, as a guiding path, and not thinking about them as failures, we frame that as part of our workflow, as part of our process as an artist or as a creative to use. And it's an incredibly helpful one for us to deal with, isn't it? To refocus into the positive side of those things.
Right. And it really is what you just said, Len. It's all about redefining for ourselves what failure is. And so, because I think so many times we say, well, this is, I failed. I didn't meet my own expectations. I failed. And that sometimes is just, it's just something that we automatically say, almost like subconscious. And if we can take the word failure and actually redefine it to be some of the things that you talked about, right? Well, I learned, I did this, and understanding what's really happening for us and redefining that, then I think we can turn all of those, whatever we're afraid of, right? Because why we have expectations is partly because we're fearing this failure. But if we can redefine that, then there's actually really not much to fear, which is also really lovely. So.
It's like the expectations fall maybe into a couple of different categories. There's the ones that help us, and there's the ones that get in the way. And we want to turn the ones that get in the way into ones that can help us, don't we? And reframing them or concentrating on them is such an important part of this process, isn't it? So identifying them and working out the ones that are going to help and concentrating on those, and shifting and changing the ones that are getting in the way, aren't they?
Yeah. And, part of this, when I was preparing for this, and this has actually been on my mind recently. I've been thinking, I've heard a lot in the world, like maybe just in the photography world, go out with zero expectations, have zero expectations. But I'm questioning if that's even possible. Like, is there a way to have zero expectations? And is that even like something that we want? And because I'm thinking, if we have legitimately zero expectations, for me anyway, I might feel a little lost. Because if I go on a walk, I mean, this is how I do my photography, right? I'll go on a walk and I try and have less expectations, right? But if I think I'm going to have zero expectations, then I really would never put my camera in my bag, because I would never expect to make a photograph, right? And so by putting my camera in my bag, I'm also kind of saying to myself, I have a possibility that I might make an image. And that's kind of an expectation that might happen, right? And so I'm curious for you, Len, do you feel like that's possible for you to have zero expectations?
Definitely not. I think so much of my life is about hope and future
right?
focused, and that's a different way of framing an expectation. Expecting something to happen, hoping for something to happen is another thing, and we're probably talking about the same thing there, but hoping is an incredibly positive thing, isn't it? I hope to go for a walk today, to enjoy myself and to relax, and I hope while I'm there that beautiful artwork is made, and that I gain some physical benefit from doing it, some relaxation benefit, and some creative benefit. So that's a hope that I would like to get from it, as opposed to going for a walk and expecting that I'll come home with a masterpiece. And I think that's one that I would fail at very, very regularly. In fact, most times I pick up my camera, it's one that I would fail at. But hoping that I would do something beautiful and exploring it and following that is something that I actually use to motivate me to go out there. So positive and helpful projections into the future, I find are incredibly helpful for me, rather than setting the ones that set ourselves up for failure. Does that make sense, doesn't it?
Yeah, I love that you differentiated between an expectation and hopefulness, right? And that's true. I probably am having more hope versus an expectation, right? So I do think that's a good way to phrase it. Like maybe a positive expectation is more about hope, and I think we do get positive outcomes when we're in that mindset, because we're not expecting anything grand and fabulous to happen, but we're hopeful that it might possibly happen, right? Like every time I go out, I'm hopeful that one day I might make something that I enjoy, that resonates with me. I mean, we say good photograph, but this is all subjective. We get to decide this, right? We get to decide what's the masterpiece. We get to decide if something's a success or a failure. We get to decide all those things, which is really beautiful, but also can be a little tricky too. So,
having zero expectations maybe could be equated with having zero thoughts. And I don't know about you, Brie. I've actually tried this process, and I fail at it regularly. I can't, even when meditating, you're actually not having zero thoughts. You're actually focusing your thoughts in. I took my students through a whole lot of exercises trying to help them get to zero thought moment and actually be somewhere else, and we failed miserably at that as a process, because that moment of zero thought is actually incredibly tiny, and identifying it and finding it and then trying to open it up and turn it into something bigger became so big and hard that it was almost an impossible goal for us. So instead, we started to focus on relaxation and other things rather than focusing on that zero. So with our expectations, focusing on the ones that work for us and our hopes seems to me work better than to have zero and to aim for nothing going on in there at all. And I suppose that's a bit of a practical thing that I seem to work out. Maybe I've got a bit further to go on that learning journey yet.
Well, we're all in this learning journey, right? And it sounds to me like, and this is one thing that I like to do now and one thing I guess that you and I are advising is be intentional with your practice, whatever it is that you do. And so instead of having all of these expectations and just letting your brain run wild and making all those choices for you, maybe being intentional about what your thoughts are going to be, what your hopes are. I mean, seriously, if this is something that you're struggling with is with all these expectations, is maybe it's a good idea to sit and actually write down what you're thinking you expect, and then how do you turn that into a hope, right? And being really intentional with how you do your creating, because this is where we actually set ourselves up for a lot of success. Is the really well, I know I'm going to say intentional again, but being very specific about what we want to think and how we want to feel when we do our creating, because that actually gives me a lot of pleasure and happiness when I do it that way versus what happens when I have these, when I just go out and I don't do it on purpose. And this is practice, right? This is what I'm saying. You don't have to do this every time, but this is how you can practice, is writing it down and then being really intentional, with what you're thinking. Because when I don't do that, or when I have done just let my brain go in the past, I end up with a lot of negative emotions. And Len, I really feel like all of us have experienced this in our lives, right? I think I expect. I'll talk about a specific. Do you mind if I talk about a specific time? Good. Yeah. So while I was working on my impossible goal, and you can go to our episode about goals and listen to a little bit about that, and I have the link to. You can find it on my website, a blog post about it. But while I was working on my impossible goal, I was putting a lot of pressure on myself to perform because I wanted to meet my goal, like make my goal happen, right? And so I was going out to do my photography with a lot of expectations, and so one time my husband and I went to a state park, went for a long weekend, and when it used to be when I would put time and effort, especially like time, you're driving, you have expensive tools, so you've put money into it, you put a lot of thought into it. Where am I going to go? And this could be for any of our art, like, how have you prepared, right? So there could be any amount of preparation, practice, whatever. And so we went to this one state park, and I had never been there, so we really didn't know what to expect. I knew I didn't know what to expect, but I also put a lot of pressure and expectations on myself that I would come away with some good images. And I remember being so excited. We took this walk, and there was it was early, and so the sun was just hitting the edges of these plants, and it was backlighting everything, and it just felt really magical and warm, and I had all of these positive emotions, and so I was like, okay, I'll make an image here, and I had a lot of expectations in that moment, that I was doing it correctly, that I had like actual good settings on my camera, that I was really, because of how I felt, I was really expecting that I would make something that was really amazing. And I didn't check anything when I was in the moment. And I waited till I got home and started looking and put everything on the computer. And I was so incredibly disappointed. I know I've talked about this in the past. I don't think I've talked about on this podcast before, but I literally just put my camera down, because I was looking on the back of my camera and zooming in and going, "Ooh, what do I have?" And I just put my camera down, and I could not control my tears. I was like a baby. I was just bawling because I was trying so hard to meet this goal, and I had all of these incredible, these huge expectations, and I had put all this pressure on myself, and when it didn't turn out how I wanted to, I was so disappointed, and I was also super discouraged. I felt so much failure. All of the things that we're talking about, right? And I do want to say, I think it's okay when we have these times, because I think we learn from them. We're not immune. This is going to happen, right? And I just really allowed myself. This is one thing I teach my clients, is just to allow ourselves when we're feeling it, not to beat ourselves up for having that, but just to allow ourselves. Like, I really just allowed myself to feel all the disappointment and discouragement, and the like I'm doing my dishes and sobbing and I just allowed myself to feel all of the failure. It felt really terrible, but obviously I'm past that. But because I'm not living in the failure, right? So I used it later as a learning opportunity. Like, I could look backwards and say, okay, what did I actually learn here? But anyway, huge lesson for me on expectations. And it wasn't until I could release myself of all of the pressure and expectations to have to do those things, to have to make images and perform and meet my goal. I was like, okay, it's okay if I don't meet my goal. It's okay if I don't make all these images. It's okay. It wasn't through gritted teeth. I literally had to let all of it go. And it was at that moment that I could actually do the work. I know I've been talking a lot, but I'd love to read this one quote. It's from it's in Guy Tall's book, his new one called Another Day Not Wasted. And this is from Alfred Stieglitz. He says, "I find the keynote to whatever I have done has been unpreparedness. In reality, the only thing in which I have been actually thorough has been in being thoroughly unprepared." And I think it's such a beautiful thing when we can decide not to have so many expectations, that we actually do the things that we want to do. It's weird, right?
It's incredibly weird. One of the things that's going on there is when we're making an artwork and we set an expectation of what it's going to look like, we are so often disappointed that it actually isn't what we imagine it to look like, that it doesn't meet our expectations. And I've had this experience so many times, Brie, and I don't think we are alone having this, where something amazing happens and we create art, and we imagine what that art is going to be. And then we look at it and it's not what we imagine it to be. And so we feel let down and disappointed and sad and upset. And yes, there's tears and a quite messy process. And we think that what we've done is terrible. We think it's trash. We think it's no good. And when we let go of that expectation, or that what we thought it was going to be or what we imagined it to be, and actually truly look at the artwork for what it actually is. And other people looking at it is so helpful in this process. When we look at it for what it truly is as an artwork, we can fall in love for it for itself, and not with this disappointment and this ruined expectation that it is something what we wanted it to be. And this is something that I've been working on for years, and I've built it into my workflow, and I know I'm not alone in this. I leave my artworks for years to sit before I evaluate them, and I try to give space between the creating end and the evaluation end, so that they're separated, and often separated by a number of years. So my workplace practice, or as an artist, how I practice things, is I revisit work I created a few years ago and evaluate it. And when I do that, I discover the most beautiful artworks in there, all the ones that didn't meet my expectations when I created them. And yet when I come back to them, having forgotten what the expectation I had was, I discover that there's incredible beauty there, and I can have a new relationship with them that doesn't have this confusion with the expectations I had while I was making it, or before that I actually made it. And that's true for words that I've written, pieces that I've performed, presentations, workshops and classes, paintings, drawings, and photographs.
I think I love that, Len, having some time, in between to let things settle and think about things and coming back to them. I think that process is different for everyone, as making some sort of judgment about your own work, right? And a lot of it can be based on expectations, right? But that can actually, if we want it to, it can go faster if we wanted it to. Depending on our, a little bit maybe on our mindset, or how we want to think about things on purpose. Like for me, it took me a little while because I was so upset about that moment. But now I look at that work and a specific image in particular, which, by the way, was nothing. It was blurry. It wasn't any. But you know what I learned? I love the look of backlit plants, and partly it was the moment, how I was feeling, right? And so that's what I learned from that one, is kind of taking what I learned from it, and maybe it doesn't have to be something that I'm ever going to post online or share with anyone in the world, but taking that expectation that I have and the disappointment I felt, and then again, reframing it to be, okay, well, what did I learn? I learned I really love this, right? And that can also be, we can switch it to be part of our learning process. And if we want to, we can even in the moment switch our expectations. With a lot of practice, we can realize that we're having those expectations that are going to lead us to disappointment and discouragement, and be able to shift them even faster.
You're exactly right there, Brie, because if we don't have that expectation when we take it or make it or create it, then we don't have to deal with it in that process of giving it time. And so working on our minds in that creative process while we're doing actually then frees us from that self-critique against it and that a negative mind. And you're exactly right there, I believe. And it's something that I've been working on, so that by going out with having fewer expectations around what sort of art and what it's going to look like, and as I'm making it, without projecting the finished artwork into the process as much, I don't need to deal with it in that same way of disappointment that I was talking about. And so as I age and become more understanding of my own process, I need to do that less and less. And it's about shifting that thought process during the creation and even afterwards around that. Yeah. And it's when I get really excited with expectations and light. Mist is another one, or the subject, and it should all be coming together, and yet it actually doesn't. That's when, and I build myself up too much for that moment. That's when I get myself in the most trouble. But when I'm actually more accepting and my expectations are under control and appropriate, I think, then the art just flows out of me, and I don't have to deal with it in that same way. It's very much a mind game, isn't it, as to what we're... And that's the whole point of our podcast, isn't it, is discussing what's going on in our minds as creatives, and how to control that process and to play with it. It's so important.
Yes. And I love what you said a minute ago. We want to, just to rephrase, we really just want to have fun making our art, right? I mean, after all, it's the thing that we're really passionate about. And, no one is literally twisting our arms to do this stuff. We want to do it. And I don't know how all of you feel, but I feel so passionate about what I do, and I want to go do it. I want to be in that creative process, and I want to be creating, right? And so I just think that having the expectations kind of takes a lot of the fun out of it. And so I'm always like, well, how can I have more fun here? How can I have more fun here? And so maybe this is a good time, Len, to talk about how we can have more fun in the present when we're creating, and to kind of release some of those expectations, and how do we be present in our work, right? Instead of thinking about the past, focusing on the future, right? I mean, we do want to focus on we do want something to happen in the future, right? That's the hope, but how do we do the present?
I think one of the most dangerous ones that comes up in listening behind the words, and it happens to me, is worrying about what other people think. And that's one of the ones that really gets in the way, trying to make art for other people, or for some sort of external reward through gratification of other people's celebration of it. When we are focused on it for a self, for its intrinsic value, that's when it is, for me, the most fun, when I switch off worrying about what other people are thinking about it. And so one way is to have fun, is not to have the expectation about what it's going to be or what it's going to be used for, or where it fits into that future. Instead, focusing on the creation and that enjoyable moment is such an important part of it. And when we're totally lost in the act of creation, and when we're not thinking about other things for it, that we're only focused on the act that we're doing, I think that's when we have these happy moments that things work out so beautifully. And in fact, that's what that the whole theory on flow. I can't pronounce the gentleman's name. I pronounce it Chisholm-Leniski. I know that's totally wrong, and I need to practice that before we actually have a whole podcast on him. But flow is very much about only thinking about what it is that you're doing in the moment of doing it. And so he defines that as happiness, when we're so engrossed in something that we can't think about any other things. And this is where our expectations tie in so strongly to this, is that if we're projecting them too far out, it takes us away from being present and being in that happy place. And for me, someone who's an intellectual and very, very physical person, being totally involved with my mind in something is my happiness. It's my happy place when I'm totally lost in whatever it is I'm doing, that nothing else in the world exists for me except what I'm concentrating on. And so much of that is letting go of some of these negative expectations, or the ones that get in the way.
Yeah, and also some of the negative can be like, and I think being in the present, you can be okay with not producing anything. Like, yeah. So we like.
I've got to laugh. I'm sorry I laughed, Brie, but it's such an important thing, and I love it when you say these things with such passion, because they move me, and because I understand. And I'm giggling in the realization how important it is for you, and it is for me too.
Well, we're having fun doing this podcast too, right?
Yeah.
So, but here's the thing. So we want to let go of to be in the present. We want to let go of what other people think, what we think other people think. Okay, because we actually don't know what other people think, but we also want to let go a little bit about what we think. And so that for me is, if I think I'm going to produce something, I kind of want to let that go, because I actually don't. I'm not sure. Like, I could be relatively confident based on the past, but then I might get myself into a little bit of trouble, right? So that's where we want to differentiate between like expectations and being hopeful. So I love in the being present, being hopeful. Like, I love that feeling of going, doing, creating and having hope, right? Also, I think there's this talk, like I read that quote from Stieglitz about the unpreparedness, right? Do we want to plan or not? And that's a question that only you can answer. We can only answer for ourselves. Some people want to really plan a lot so that you have there's a possibility for success. And some people, your success looks like not planning at all. I have a quote from, so this is from Guy Tal, actually. The other one was from Alfred Stieglitz in Guy Tal's book. So this is the same book, Another Day Not Wasted. He says, if you are not a planner, don't feel you need to be. It's okay. We don't need to put that pressure on ourselves to plan when we aren't actually really planners, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a planner, prepare yourself for the possibility that you may find good reasons to deviate from your plans, right? Because if you're a planner, you may be expecting that your plan goes according to how you've lined everything up, right? But you may find good reasons to not go with those plans. And then he says, sticking to your plans at all costs, or considering it a failure if you did not accomplish what you originally planned, will diminish or eliminate your ability to be creative. I think that's huge, right? So decide, are you going to plan or are you not going to plan? If you are a planner, are you going to deviate from it? Like, how are you going to be in the present based on how you work, right? Anything else that you can think of involving this, Len?
It keeps pulling back to this idea: the better you understand how you work as a creative, the better off you are, aren't you? easier it is to be in the space that you know that you need to be in. And he's very, very right that if you're a planner, then plan. And if you're scattered and you enjoy being scattered and you're off in 100 different directions and that's the way that you work, accepting it and learning to be in that space can be really, really helpful and the perfect space for you. It's so important not to be someone else in this process, isn't it? The most important thing as a creative is learning to be you.
Yeah,
I think
and
this
that
has been
comes
my lifelong lesson in art. Is it teaches me who I am and what I should be and how I want them to work, what my desires and wishes are, what I want them to be. It's such a beautiful thing to do and to be in that particular moment.
I totally agree with you, Len. In that space and figuring out who we are, that just takes practice. And so practicing what we and creating and doing this repeatedly, and partly because we were so passionate about it, right? But that practice really can tell us a lot about ourselves, and then doing the learning. And it's all just a big cycle, right? And then really every single time we do this cycle, we know more about ourselves, and then we can kind of tune in a little bit more to to how we work, what that looks like, but also then not being super rigid, being okay with shifting or discovering something new. Oh, I didn't know that about myself today, or I'm actually this way now, but I didn't used to be, right? And so maybe you're a painter and you used to be super messy painter and used to love that, but then you kind of in your discovery of yourself, you figured out that you actually do like things really neat, and so then you go the opposite direction. And I think that's totally okay to change our minds about how we work and who we are, and allowing that to happen is, I think, a really beautiful thing. Not getting so stuck in one space, and in going along with that. I know we've talked about the expectations, right? I just talked about a little bit about discovering who we were and being okay with the change. A lot of that comes with discomfort. And when we have something unexpected, it might feel a little bit uncomfortable at first. It might feel amazing, right? But sometimes the unexpected can feel a little bit uncomfortable. And so I think embracing that, saying, okay, it's okay that we're gonna, that, or maybe even being in the present and saying, I'm gonna expect unexpected things today, and so I'm just gonna put that in the back of my mind. And when those things happen, I'm just gonna be uncomfortable with that feeling of maybe I'm going to learn something new about myself that might feel uncomfortable. I'm going to do this thing, whatever it is. And that's a balance too that we want to watch for, because we don't want to feel so uncomfortable that we're actually feeling fear that can derail us from our creativity. But all of the what's the quote? Discomfort is it's kind of the key to our growth. And so embracing that discomfort is going to be super helpful for us as we grow and develop into the creatives that we want to be.
So if we're not changing and feeling uncomfortable and trying and experimenting, we're not growing, are we? And we really need to be exploring and pushing ourselves and experimenting, trying different approaches to figure out what works best for us. And sometimes we think we should be working this way, and that it's actually a limiting belief. And we have to get uncomfortable to get out of there and to find one that actually suits us perhaps a little bit better, or is more helpful for the creative process that you actually want to be in. And there's times and places for all the different types of behaviours and responses that we have. We need a whole gamut of our personality to pull it all together, don't we? And how we behave at home might be very, very different to how we do it in the field when we're actually creating, as opposed to that moment of hanging it in a gallery and doing the presentation part of the process. So it is a really broad set of skills, isn't it? And tuning into them, experimenting with them, and finding out what works for us is very much a part of that process, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, I totally agree. So one of the things I just want to share, one of the things that I do before I create, and I talked about being intentional. So one of the small, so there's a couple of thoughts that I come when that I decide to think on purpose when I'm creating. Okay. So one of them is, I'm just going to have fun today. Right. And
like
maybe
we are always trying to do, aren't we? We are always
totally
trying to have fun here.
Totally. So, and maybe while I'm saying a couple, and Len, maybe you have one. I'm curious if you have one. So I have another one. Another one is, I might have I might discover something amazing today. And whether that's something about myself or about my own photography or whatever it is, right? I might, and that's partly like, then I have hope when I'm thinking that. And I give myself this assignment to think these things, like I'm going to have fun. You know, I might find or learn something amazing today. And whatever happens is okay. And with all of those, I assign my brain to think those, and all of the thoughts, like I expect that I'm going to have, whatever it is I'm expecting, kind of go out the door, because I'm thinking these on purpose. And now I have to say, a lot of what our expectations are totally subconscious. Like, I don't think we actually really know that we're, not a lot of us anyway. And it's possible, but if we say them out loud before we making our art. But most of the time we discover what our expectations are after they're unfulfilled, and we feel terrible. And so that's the time that is actually like really great, that we have the expectations, and then we can learn what those expectations are. Like, maybe as we have some awareness, we discover, oh my gosh, I've had this expectation for so long, and I'm just now discovering that whenever that's unfulfilled, I really feel like crap. So, and so discover what that is, and figure out how to switch that over. That's a lot of what I help my clients do, is switch that over, because it's way more fun to not feel like crap when you're creating or after you've created. So that is a little shift you can do, is just even having some awareness about what you're thinking can be really helpful.
Yeah, it's stopping and monitoring your thoughts are very, very important in that process. And whether you frame them as goals, dreams, expectations, hopes, unraveling them all and having healthy ones that are actually going to help you produce what it is. And for me, being turning up and being present in the moment is such an important part of my practice, and having fun is very much a part of that. Clearing my mental space so that I'm not worrying about things. I've got something on the back of my mind today, and it's been there for a few days, and I plan to go out and create this afternoon. And I know that if I don't actually fix that before I go, I'll spend my whole time out wandering, wondering about whether, and it'll just be at the back of my mind, that niggly little thing. So I do a little bit of clearing up, trying to get rid of the things that are getting in the way or distracting me in that process. And I definitely can't get into a thoughtless space, but I do try to get into a space where I can be more in tune to my feelings and to my emotions, and to be so much more sensitive to what's capturing my attention, and being really present when I'm in that creative space. So having fun is very much a part of that, but so much is also letting go of all these other things so that I can be more present and in the moment. And I think that for me is one of the absolute biggest, is how to be more present and letting go of all these back thoughts and negative thoughts and expectations that are getting in the way for me.
And then, just to finish that off, also, if we have all those things, just knowing we're human and it's going to come up, and just be really patient and compassionate with ourselves, right? Like, we're not perfect, and nobody is, by the way. And so I think just remembering that it's okay. It's totally fine. And I think nothing terrible happens, right? I mean, the most terrible thing is just we feel some crappy feelings, and those are totally fine to feel, right? I mean, the truth is we're not going to feel happy all the time. And so feeling some terrible feelings for a little while is also okay too. So
one of the worst expectations is that we're going to do something great, or that we're going to actually make something, or that I think creating an expectation that there's a downtime, that there's a time not to be producing creative artworks, that there's other things in our lives that take over, and we need to give them attention, is important. And we need to make space to deal with those, and to make space to create art in the same breath. So I always think of it as waves, personally. Then it comes in waves, and when I'm there, I want to be totally immersed and enjoying it, and riding that wave. And then when there's that lull, and there's that quiet in between the next wave that's to come, there's other things that need to be done and attuned to. So that's one of the ways that I actually manage that and play with it. What a fascinating conversation.
it's beautiful. I expected it would go this way.
You did, didn't you? And of course it was going to, all of our conversations to do that. I'm thinking, and it's something that we've said a few times, and I think it's worth repeating, the better we understand ourselves and the way that we create, the more powerful we can be as creatives. And understanding ourselves, the creative process, and how we manage that, the easier it becomes. And it's not an easy journey, is it, Brie? And we both know through life experience that it's an incredibly rewarding and such a beautiful thing to be working at, but it is hard work sorting that out, isn't it? Tuning in to our innermost thoughts and how we set ourselves up with these expectations can shape our performance. so strongly, and we can shift and change those to get better control of it. I think it's such a valuable lesson that we've talked about today.
It's beautiful. I was just thinking when you're talking, it's beautiful. It's hard work, but it's beautiful. It's a beautiful way to live. I love it.
Definitely. Well, Brie, what another inspiring conversation. I feel so inspired. I love sharing this with you and with our listeners. Although when I'm actually creating it, I'm more thinking about our conversation and what other people are going to be thinking about what we're talking about. And just like art, that's one of the keys, isn't it, is to be present very, very carefully. So for your listeners, let's switch gears for a second. We have a few questions for you.
Yes, we do.
What expectations do you have when you create? Have you stopped and thought about them? So we challenge you to stop and think about these expectations, and just simply 2 categories is a good way to start off. The ones that get in your way, that cause you stresses, and the ones that help you. And actually spending some time thinking about that and wondering which ones are helping you and which ones aren't. And then, of course, go on and we challenge you to take those uncomfortable steps to try and reframe them and to work those ones that may be hindering you. And Brie and I would really love to know about them. So please drop us an email or send us a text or however you like to communicate with us and talk about expectations with us. And we'd so love to continue that conversation with you. And our conversations in our creative affair, we encourage you to share them with other people and to have these conversations with your fellow creatives and start that conversation with them. And in that process, help unpack them for yourselves. I know in my life as a teacher, I learned so much by teaching and talking about these things to other people. And today I've learned so much from Brie, and hopefully she's learned something from me as well. So if you want to email us, of course you can. Our email is create@acreativeaffairpodcast.com. And finally, for me, I run a photography school here in Australia. And it's really fascinating that when I brought all the elements in my life together, such as teaching, creativity, creating, art teaching, photography, outdoor guiding, and the environment, that my whole life finally came together, and I understood and felt so much happier with myself. So today I run workshops and courses, and I run them in person and online. You might like to visit me here in Australia, or one day I'll get out and travel the world again. And you can find out more about my teaching at lensschool.com.
Fabulous. Yes, I was smiling when you said in person. Yay, in person. And for me, as a coach for creatives, I work with my clients to help them achieve their goals and become happier with their art, businesses, and personal lives. So that's just a small bit of what I can do. But you can go to creativemindscoach.com, and you can sign up for a discovery call. It's 30 minutes, and it's free. And I'll help you make a plan to unlock your potential and achieve your creative dreams. It's really amazing work. So before we go, we just want to tell everyone how much we've appreciated you sharing the podcast. And if you know someone who could benefit from these conversations that we're having about creativity and the brain and all these things, goals, projects, by the time this comes out, we'll have talked about playing with your art, and we're going to talk about flow in an upcoming episode. If you know someone who would be interested in listening to this, please share it with them. We'd love to have more people hear this and be happier in the work that they create. So that's kind of our goal, we want you to have fun with your art. We have fun with ours, and we'd love for you to have fun with yours. So you can also find us, as always, links to everything are in the show notes. You can visit us at acreativeaffairpodcast.com. You can find us on any of your players, and you can subscribe, and you can have the new episode delivered to your inbox. So, Len, you're going to go wandering with Momo, your dog, and go play in the rain. Is that right?
It's not raining, unfortunately. But,
darn it. Sorry.
Darn it. I was planning on getting soaking wet and then washing him this evening. But anyway, we'll get out in the mud regardless and enjoy our time.
That sounds fabulous. I'm on vacation with my family, and we're at the beach. And so I'm going to go enjoy a beautiful sunset and a beautiful dinner. And I hope everyone that you enjoy all of the lovely art that you create. So until next time, goodbye, Len.
Goodbye, Brie. And thank you for another wonderful conversation. Bye.
Bye.